Did anyone even know that this show came back? I'm glad it is. Hey there, this is your Matt Doodle with To My Timeless Hands, Doodle here with another video, and today I'd like to talk about Season 2 of My Adventures with Superman, Episode 1 and 2. And I gotta say up front, this show does everything for me. And I'm not just saying that because, Superman's positive in this one. I'm just saying it is a well-written show. And they're actually moving past certain different dislikes I had from the Season 1. And I hope you watched the first season because if you haven't, some of the second season will be a little weird to you. And before I start with the review, I gotta say one thing. Warner Brothers, don't you dare copyright me for using any of your clips. I see so many people use it, and I will fight you on that. I have a system now, and I am going to use it if I have to. So, other than that little outburst, I really like the first two seasons in this show so far. It could drop the ball anytime later, but right now it's doing pretty good. And I want to talk about the first episode. I love how they portray Clark in this show. The fact that he's just a sweet guy. That Superman and Clark are one and the same, but in two different ways. The fact that, Clark is technically himself, because that's something I've been saying for so long, that it doesn't make sense for him to completely change his entire identity as soon as he grows up, and that Clark Kent is the disguise instead of Superman. It's so weird, because if you grew up as yourself, you wouldn't change your entire identity when you're older. So I like the idea that Clark Kent is who he truly is, and Superman, not a disguise, is just kind of him trying to understand himself later. But he's more confident because he doesn't have to worry about things as much. And because this is the second season, we don't have to worry about, the progression of, okay, who's Superman, what's the deal, all that good stuff. At this point, Superman already has his abilities, and it's awesome. And because of all that stuff, we start out in like a dream type sequence where Superman is, kind of being praised by the masses. And it's really cool because it shows that Superman still feels kind of awkward by that, even in his own dream. But it also shows his kind of xenophobia to himself. Because, yes, he knows he's an alien now, but from what he's seen from the first season, it's horrible that his own race of people is not good. And I gotta talk about that a little bit later on in this video. But so far, he has no idea. He just saw that and was like, I don't like that. And the fact that he is scared that because he's an alien, no one will care or love him anymore because, he's not human. And it's so sad. But that was just a dream. And so now we go to one of the best things I love about the show, the romance. I am a big romance person when it comes to superhero stuff and really anything in general. I just love love. That's a fun sentence. And basically, it's Valentine's Day in this episode, and, Clark is Clark, so he wants to do something simple with Lois. Just a little like, well, what he says here.
First, I'm gonna pick up Lois's favorite ramen, extra spicy for her, mild for me. Then we'll sit on the roof of the Daily Planet and watch the sunset.
And it's so sweet. I find that so, amazing and all stuff. And it kind of goes into a running joke because no one likes his idea at all. Because to everyone else, that is kind of like, you do not do that because they've only been together for what? I think it's a year now or even less since it's Valentine's Day. I don't know. But even Cat Grant is trying to give Clark advice, which is hilarious. But I guess Valentine's is canceled because, Perry needs to one-up Vicky Vale. Also, I almost forgot to mention that Jimmy Olsen is rich in this season. And that goes into the first season because, he basically made a very popular social media account that the Daily Planet now owns, and that Jimmy technically owns the Daily Planet now too, which kind of goes into a fun gag that I think is going to be portrayed through the entire season. Because he's rich now, so what do you think a rich person who's that young is going to do? He's going to waste the money as much as he can. Like, he has to make videos, but, how is he going to do that when he wants to be with his friends? But one thing that I really like about this show is the fact, again, that Lois and Clark are already done with the whole getting to know each other. Who are they? No, they are straight up in a relationship now, and it really shows because they're so cool about it. And what I mean by cool is they're so chill. They're just in love. They already say that I love you, and it's awesome. It is so sweet. And I know people are gonna be like so pissed off. It's like, oh, where's the drama? Where's the mystery? I'm like, we're done with that. That was in season 1, and even then, I was already like, they were already like, no, let's speed that up. Let's make them love each other already. And I love that so much because we already know about the relationship between Superman and Lois in the comics and any other media. They are soulmates, like how Peter Parker and Mary Jane are supposed to be. Marvel. I don't know. Well, sorry about that, but I'm glad that this show just says, you know what, screw all the wishy-washy. They're together. That's the point. Valentine's Day, they love each other. And that's what matters. And then what is interesting is we're going back to the whole Clark is trying to figure out what happened to his spaceship. Oh, and before I talk about that, I gotta mention something real quick. Lois was assigned to figure out what that ship thing was by Perry. And I noticed something because she says she has a friend named Hank, and he's an astronaut. Now, if you don't know why that's significant, is because in the comics and in a certain film that I genuinely like, Death and Return of Superman, that is Hank Henshaw. He was a astronaut that went into space, which was originally in the comics supposed to be a parody on the That's 4. They all went nuts. he was a brain in a robot, and basically his entire family died, right? And then he became Cyborg freaking Superman. So that name is like, okay, what are they gonna do? Because this show has done so well where they will just mix characters together, like in the first scene where they mixed Amazo, the one that creates Amazo, the robot, with Parasite, and mix them together really well, which is good because one of them is very well known and the other one is not really. So that's a good combination. So in my immediate theory to this is that Hank Henshaw is going to be a mix of Cyborg Superman and Metallo. So this version of Cyborg Superman will have kryptonite, and the show has clearly shown they have kryptonite. Thank you for coming to my TED Talk on that front. Let's keep going. One thing that I also like is they're clearly showing Lex Luthor be in this show, being the little menace that he is, getting inspired by Jimmy, which, Jimmy, this wasn't your best moment. And I know people are saying, why do people like this, but not Zack Snyder's Superman, if they're both basically the whiny, twinky little character with hair? Well, first of all, this little twink is still menacing. Yes, he is not the billionaire evil villain we all know, and he still has hair, but he's still a little shithole. He is not a good guy. He actively worked with Amazo and was genuinely already did not like Superman. So there you go. The reason why people don't like Zack Snyder is because of how awkward he was. This version of Lex was not awkward. He was still menacing. So that's how we get to enjoy that. Okay, back to the whole Clark trying to get his spaceship. So they go into the spaceship. It's really interesting, how the spaceship is really dark, really, and it's kind of overrun with kryptonite because of the travel they went to Earth. And one thing I always like, the fact that people should know, basically what kryptonite is basically just alien cancer, basically, just in rock form. A crystal that grows on you, and it does to anything that falls to the technology there. And it's interesting because we actually get to see Jor-El again speak English. It turns out because he just didn't know how to get Earth's language right. And this goes into something that I am not a huge fan of. I love the show. I love what they're doing, but there's some stuff I did not like. The first season made it seem like Krypton was a war planet, and I thought that was a twist, that it's not. It's just how it seems, right? But no, apparently they are. They're more like the Viltrumites from Invincible in this one, which is weird because Jor-El says from the Krypton Empire, and they were in a war.
The Kryptonian Empire had conquered and spread across the stars like a disease until we found an enemy we could not defeat. Our empire was falling to a war of its own making.
And they were conquering. I'm like, excuse me? The point of Krypton was supposed to be they were better, and they have flaws, but they weren't, evil, so I'm a little weirded out by that, but I do like it in the sense that Superman is still Superman. Even with that background, that, Krypton was not a good place. The fact that Clark actually became a good person from his Earth parent is amazing. And I also like that. It's this weird back and forth. It reminds me of how they would do for Batman, which that, sometimes they would say that his parents were actually corrupt, and sometimes they weren't. That's how I feel about that for this one. But again, Superman's still Superman, so it's still good. And even with the short amount of time that this version of Jor-El is in here, it is still very nice because they still treat him like someone who misses his kid, because he is a ghost, and a robot ghost, but it's so sweet to see how he's trying to be with him, because they go with this running joke in this episode that Clark has to do a romantic gesture to Lois because of the danger that he's put her under, and it's a weird thing that everyone wants him to do bigger stuff. But what is with aliens always in shows, movies, whatever, calling, girlfriend, wife, whatever, a mate?
You brought your mate here, your fragile human mate, who does not have any of our powers. And then you lost her.
Dad!
Isn't that always just kind of weird to you? Because it is weird to me. I don't know, maybe it's just me. But apparently Amanda Waller is also in this show, and she is trying to take all the technology from Clark's ship. And I love how they portrayed Waller here, because she is as gross and uncaring as everyone loves her to be. She just wants things her way to be done, and that's how it works for her. And what's interesting is because beforehand, Lois Lane's dad was the general that, wanted to go against Superman, and he basically, got demoted and basically put in prison because Amanda is Amanda, and she, made it worse so she can be in charge. But they're also doing something that they're going back on, because the first season, they made all of Superman's villains that they usually show there mostly just technology-based and more robotics. They made Livewire all robotics. They made Amazo all robotics. They kind of made Deathstroke kind of all robotic, kind of. And this one, they still have that, but they're mutating them more, which is a cool thing, because this guy actually grows. Instead of the arms just growing, the entire thing grows, and it's really cool. Okay. While I was editing this video, I realized the guy that I was talking about here that can grow with actual superpowers is freaking Damage. I have not seen or heard from this guy since the comic he was introduced in. The reason why I find it really cool is because he was one of those heroes who were supposed to be, the new age of heroes, but they didn't do anything with him. So the fact that he's here is so cool. I know he looks different, but of course they need to make it look different for this show. And they don't want to make him look too much like Hulk, which he does in the comics. They have Deathstroke finally having his eye, cut out. Cool. And that Superman finds out that he has a cousin, Kara, supposed to be with him. And that is cool because we actually get to see Kara, and we actually saw that in the promotional image for this show. But also, she's already a baby as well when she was taken to space, which is also another change. I'm kind of like, isn't the point that, she's been on Krypton longer, so she understands that Earth is very primitive to Krypton? I don't know. This is a weird one. They just kind of making the same thing in my mind. Unless they're going to do something else with Kara. I don't know. But Lois finds out that her dad is needing help, so Superman says he's going to help her. Because of all the kryptonite that was in the ship, one thing that's really sad is the Superman and his dad basically saying goodbye. It is such a tearjerker in this, and it's so sweet at the same time, too. But I also love, because the kryptonite was gone, it got to look more like the Krypton we all know, with the white crystals and everything like that. Clark basically agreed to help Lois find her dad, and that's how we get into episode 2. Episode 2 is such an interesting thing, because Jimmy, still has a job, but, as an influencer in the Daily Planet, he kind of needs to, post, but because he didn't in the last episode, Perry kind of tells him you need interns, which are children apparently in this one, and it's pretty interesting. When Clark and Lois are trying to talk about how to find General Lane, they find this boy who, he has a red sweater. Yes, he's black, but his name is Billy. Red sweater, kid alone, by himself. Yes, he has a dad, but this show has done really different things. And this show has not shown that names do not matter. They do in here, even if it's first names, like Ivo and Alexander. And Hank. This kid is going to be freaking Shazam. I bet that in this show he's going to be Shazam. And I want that so badly. Yes, he has a parent. And yes, he is black. That shouldn't matter because they have actually tried in the comics to make Shazam black. And I think he looks badass. Because they can't call him that, they can call him something else, like what they've been trying to in the comic, Captain Thunder. I like that name. Let's do that. Also, it'd be a nice change of pace. You may hate me in the comments, or you may love it. I don't know. Let's hear it. So, Clark and Lois go to a prison, basically go to a prison because of the kid who's looking for his dad. And it turns out also General Lane is there because Amanda needs his assistance, because of course she can't do something by herself without having someone else help her. So basically, Lois and Clark break him out. And it's funny and kind of sad that General Lane does not respect his daughter that much, in the sense that, yes, he wants her to be okay, but she also doesn't accept her help. This is Lois Lane we're talking about. You do realize Lois is going to help you no matter what. That's awesome. And Superman is also awesome here because, again, he's a very nice guy, and he doesn't like General Lane to disrespect Lois, and that is an awesome thing. And it's weird when Lois is kind of saying, don't do that, don't fight with my dad, don't do this. That is weird. And also, the xenophobia coming from her, because she also thinks that Superman should not find his cousin or open the gateway. That is messed up. But I do understand from what they've both seen, and that is a valid criticism as well, because these feel like genuine people. The two lanes are very, frustrating with each other. They're both blockheadedness, but people like that exist. And then the other thing, when I said that they change from just being robotics and, technology and all that stuff, they introduce Atomic freaking Skull in here, and he looks beautiful here. No technology and everything. Maybe there's some technology, but he has a freaking skull instead of a robotic skull that, emulates the fire or whatever. No, it's a freaking skull, and that's how it works. And that's what I like about it. I like the fact that Superman actually struggles with him, not just with Krypton, not with anything like that. Actually struggles. That's interesting. And it's going to be interesting, too, when Clark and the General talk, because General does not like Superman, and Lois, does, because, that's her boyfriend. And it's funny because the General kind of criticizes Clark for not being there. So is he going to later on figure out that Clark is Superman and not like them both? Weird thing. Again, I love the fact that how Amanda is portrayed in here, because they do find prisoners in this underground prison that they went into. And they find the kids, Billy's dad, please be Shazam later on. And it turned out these people that were being put there were just kind of minor offenders. They weren't that bad. And Amanda Waller, being how she is already like, no one cares about them. I need to, use people for the greater good. Oh, Suicide Squad. Okay. She's basically giving these people superpowers. Like actual superpowers. Not just, technology. Actual superpowers. This is an interesting way to do that. Make them feel like actual, reasons why they're all horrible criminals. Because, they are. And why they just happen to have superpowers. It makes sense. And I love the fact that people don't trust Superman here. But we do. We, the audience, still do. And it's a freaking awesome feeling to root for a kind and generous Superman. So after they rescue Professor Lane and all the prisoners, Jimmy also kind of has his own little side story of, having the interns that I talked about and, trying to figure out how to get to Clark and Lois and doing all that good stuff. It's a cool thing. They kind of still go with the whole Jimmy is overcharging everything. And I think that's going to be the joke by the end of the show, that he's going to be broke again and have to work as a photographer at the Daily Planet, Daily Bugle, Daily Planet. So, like, he basically buys a boat, and Amanda basically just tells her whole spiel about not really caring about people and that you need to protect, the world instead of how her way is right, and how the general found out that what Amanda's been doing. And it is such a sweet thing. And apparently, Lois basically makes Clark in charge of taking care of the general. And the general doesn't like him because he thinks he abandoned, his daughter. So that's an interesting concept, and it's going to be a funny thing to see Clark try to hide his identity with the general. He's not good at it in this show, to be honest. And then we go into a scene that I just find really interesting. They show the good old Lex, which they've been calling him Alexander here, work for Task Force X. And I want to see how he rises up the ranks, or how he steals everyone's tech. Because again, Lex Luthor, you don't trust this man. And so that's my thoughts on the first 2 episodes of My Adventures with Superman. This show has been such a good thing to come back to. Yes, they did not do well with advertising, and I just wish that more people would watch it, because I've heard online that people didn't even know the show's back. So, you know what? I like the show, and I want to talk about it. So I will talk about whenever this show comes out, maybe the day after it's released, because these videos take a while for me to make. But seeing a good Superman is such a relief, and it makes me more excited for the show to keep going and for the new James Gunn Superman to come out. So what are your thoughts on the first 2 episodes? Did you even watch it? Did you even know it was out? Let me know in the comments down below. And if you like this video, do all the things you do on YouTube for that, because I'm not going to talk about that anymore. And just let me know what you specifically think about the show itself. Do you like the anime-inspired style they have in this show? The speed, the force, everything like that? Because that's one thing I also really like. Let me know. What do you think of the changes? Because there are some that I do and don't like. But I am hopeful either way. Oh my god, they've upped their game with this season. And today, I'd like to talk about episode 3 of My Adventures with Superman. Goddamn, they have really improved themselves from the first season. Anything that was negative, they've really fixed it. Oh, you don't like the fact that there's too many supervillains that are basically just get their powers from robotic tech? Well, here you go. You want Superman to actually feel more like the Superman that we all know and love? Well, we got more of that here. You want to see the romance between Lois and Clark? Well, here you go. And it's consistent. And you want to see Jimmy be a consistently good character? Oh my god, there's more of that. So good. And the fact that they introduced so many cool people from Superman's, was it Rogues Gallery? Well, that too, but also just friends. Like, the first person in this episode that Superman saves is Silas Stone. He was in a burning building here for reasons that I will explain later. But if you don't know who Silas Stone is, he is the father of Cyborg. Now, I don't think they're going to introduce Cyborg here right now, because they said that Victor is too young. What is he, like 10, I think? I don't think he's going to become Cyborg at like that age. And if they are, damn, that's horrifying. But the way Superman saves him here, it is really interesting. He had this aura to protect him from the fire, because Superman was not realistically able to get his entire body, just some of it. But this aura that he got protected him. And the reason why I actually find that really cool is because that's technically how Superman flies, or how Superman is able to fly in super speed with people without having to, hurt them, like how Barry or any of the Flash have the Speed Force. To Superman, he has this force that allows whatever energy he has to transfer to the next person. And I love that technically this is a representation of that to make sense, because that's technically how Superman can fly. That's how they've been showing in the comics. I know some of you are going to say, no, they're giving Superman too many powers. But no, Superman has had these powers for a long time. And remember, Superman has wackier powers than this. So this is actually really cool. But it looks like that the fire that Silas was in was actually from Livewire. And I love that she's back in this season. But it looks like she has more actual control over her powers, because she looks normal at this point. Basically, Silas has to be silent about whatever happened later. And it's like, there's more? Damn. But one thing I really like is they also introduced John Henry Irons, one of my favorite characters, that I even made an entire video about how I want to see him in the new DC universe. And if you want to see that, that's up right here, I think. But how they showed him here is like, ooh, he's a very beefy guy. But he also invented tech for this company that I completely forgot the name. My bad. But back to some normalcy, where we go into Jimmy and Clark's apartment, where they actually have Lane there. Because remember, he needed to lay low, but he's a slob apparently now, because... And it's funny seeing Jimmy being a boss to someone, even if it's a child, which I'm not sure that's legal, but I don't know. This goes into something that I completely forgot to mention in the last video, is that I love that they portrayed being a social media personality as a positive thing, that it can actually help. And that's really refreshing because, yeah, there's a lot of whack jobs on here, but they show that Jimmy is genuinely trying to do what he can on there. It's cool. And it feels like a milestone, to be honest. And this goes into the thing that I also really like, that Lane does not like Clark because, Clark has to do his Superman stuff, but he can't really tell him. So to Lane, it looks like Clark is just blowing off Lois in every chance he can. Like, he just leaves in the morning, and of course, Lane, a literal general, is going to be suspicious about that. So how long do you think they're going to do the whole him not knowing his Superman identity? Leave your thoughts in the comments down below. It looks like we're going into a little side plot, or I guess the second plot, that Lois is trying to catch a story about Hammer Tech. Actually, I just figured out the company that John Henry was working for. And, Lois, of course, saying the hard-hitting questions to the main guy here. I can never remember his name, but who's obviously a very shady person, who reveals Metallo, which is just a robot here. It's cool, but I don't necessarily like the design, to be honest. Like, I get what they're going with, that, all the tech they have, all the abilities they're able to get, comes from Kryptonian technology. But I would like the suits, or, roboticness to be a little slimmer. I never really like that. And I don't know what they're going to do with it later. But it also looks like that Lois is having a match with Vicky Vale, which she keeps going back to Metropolis for, even though she's supposed to live in Gotham, apparently. But it actually is funny because they actually have a back and forth that actually is positive, in the sense that Vicky is not completely evil. Yeah, she's biased, but she is trying to, just do her job well enough to be on top. And I guess that's what Lois is going to learn to try to do. So let's see how that goes. And how Jimmy has that, I guess, intern is the kid who technically he's hired, right? Or he's employer of? Yeah, I gotta learn to speak English better. Well, she basically has a cool idea of having a little helicopter attached to a camera to catch things, which I actually think is a really cool idea. But I love that Jimmy is trying to be a responsible adult, saying you can't go into a dangerous situation, because the little girl who is Flip from the first season, I love her in here, trying to go into dangerous situations, like, of course, Lois, Clark, and Jimmy do. But Jimmy is, trying to protect her, so he basically asks Clark to help him try to find her, because she looks like she's lost. Turns out she's at her home, where her uncle happens to be John Henry. I didn't know that she is the niece to John Henry Irons. And I am loving the world building so far. This just warms my heart. That means if they do the whole people growing up in this show, then John Henry will be Steel. Then she will be Steel later on, because that's usually how it goes. And I'm like, oh, so many good ideas. And apparently John Henry's was fired for telling the main guy that his Metallo, I guess, tech wasn't going to actually work. And Silas was also part of that. But, they were trying to silence them so the guy can actually unveil the tech, of course. But if you put too much of the Metallos everywhere else, they could go boom, right? And it's kind of like an espionage thing where John Henry's trying to figure that out. Superman's going to help. Jimmy is there as well. Flip is the niece to John Henry, so she, of course, is there. And then Lois gets into the apartment because, she's trying to catch her story. And that leads her to Clark and Jimmy and John Henry. And then Vicky also follows. And it's super cool. The stories collide. Nice. And guess what? Livewire comes back and, it's trying to destroy any evidence that John Henry has. And guess what happens? An amazing fight between Livewire and Superman. And I love how anytime a villain shows up and is trying to do their job, and it's not expecting too much, making it super easy. And as soon as the superhero, in this case Superman, shows up and says, hello, I love it, because it's the villain does not expect to actually have the challenge. And it actually goes into something else. Livewire, I didn't notice it until in the beginning, but she doesn't have her suit anymore. All that electric powers is fused inside her. So again, they're going more into the fact that these people are gaining superpowers and not superpower tech anymore. So, chef's kiss. Thank you for listening to the fans. But apparently, Superman was not able to save the evidence that John Henry had, so that's a problem. And it's so interesting because Livewire was originally going to end John Henry's life, but because Superman's there, she just had to destroy the evidence. I love the fact that she just runs after, because she will not deal with Superman. And the guy who employed her, the main, head of the company that tried to unveil the machine, the Metallo early, is basically just hired a hitman, or I guess hit woman in this case. And I love the ignorance that he thinks that anyone is going to be able to stop Superman. I love that type of thought, because then it makes them seem more pathetic, which is awesome. I guess the guy just lost his mind, because now he's trying to activate more of the Metallos. Again, I don't like the fact that they're not actually half human, half machine. like or an actual person piloting the machine. Eh. But they go after Superman now. And since these are Kryptonian tech, they whoop Superman's ass. And it's extremely hard to watch, but also, kind of cool. But then you know who comes in and saves him? John Henry Irons in the freaking steel suit. And it's okay. It's cool that he has the hammer and he has almost the look of the Superman symbol. But I don't like how big it is and how bulky. And it doesn't even have a helmet on him or the cape. And I don't like this constant change where to make steel cool, they have to remove the whole, cape and then the Superman symbol. And I guess even this one, not even the mask anymore. I like the idea of it, but it kind of just doesn't really work for me, to be honest. Still cool, but eh. But then the main, guy who activated all the Metallos basically started off a giant, almost explosion on the building, and Superman has to go save it by using that kinetic energy that we talked about in the beginning, by basically absorbing it. But guess what? Superman is not technically strong enough to be able to do that. So John Henry has to be the one to destroy the core with his freaking hammer, and he does it outside the suit. He gets restrained by all the Metallos, so he has to get out. And Flip, in a safe distance, is helping with the helicopter with little cannons in it of like confetti, and it blinds the robots. Which why would that matter? They're robots; they don't actually see. I don't know, but it's still cool to see her actually helping in a safe distance, and it's cool to see an actual civilian being able to help, like John Henry too. But then John Henry actually destroys the core, and it saves the day. And I kind of find it awesome that technically Superman wasn't actually the one that saved everyone. It was a person that he technically inspired, that was also inspired by the city he loves, and that is just awesome. And it's cute seeing Lois and Clark try to talk to each other, and it goes into something I actually like about this, that, Clark and Lois are already a couple. They don't have to deal with all the wishy-washy stuff, right? But they do have problems. One thing that bothers me about a lot of times when writers want to make a couple happen, they have to make them go through this entire like wishy-washy, will they, won't they type situation until they get together, and usually that's the end. And it's kind of boring, to be honest. And then they want to break them up to have more problems. But what I love about this is the problem that's going on here is that Lois was actually offered a job with Vicky in Gotham because she actually saw Lois's worth, and because Lois is crazy about her job. That's a type of thing that I like, that Clark and Lois love each other, but the problem is they just never have time or don't know how to talk about what they want to talk about. It's not because they don't love each other, not because they want to keep secrets about each other. It's just they don't have time and they don't know how to say it. And I love that piece because that feels relatable if you are in a relationship or just in general with people. And I just love that. And before this episode actually ends, we get into something that's really interesting. John Henry is trying to get back to work, thinking that, he has his job back, but apparently he doesn't. And guess who actually took over the company? Lex freaking Luthor. He has LexCorp now, so they're making him be the douchebag that we all know and love from the comics. I don't know when he's gonna get bald, but he's rich now, has LexCorp, and he wants John Henry's tech. So that gets me into a theory that says that John Henry is going to be have to have a secret identity as Steel, even though it doesn't necessarily make sense because he already had his face exposed while he was wearing the armor with the hammer. But I don't know. I just want to see John Henry in the steel suit so badly, with the face covered, the cape, the symbol. Awesome. And if they have that and the suit is still bulky, I'd actually be kind of fine with it. I still want to slim down though. But the fact that Lex Luthor now has LexCorp, we're eating good now as Superman fans. So that is the third episode of My Adventure Superman. They are killing it with this show. They have heard all the criticisms. They have looked us in the eye and said, you know what? We will give you good TV now. We will give you all the things that people have wanted for Superman for so long. All his supporting characters, all his villains, actually giving them superpowers, doing everything we love, keeping Superman a good, positive person, even with the bad stuff happening, having Lois and Clark be in a committed relationship, but having problems which people in relationships have, but not because they don't love each other. That is what I love about this show. But what do you think? Do you like the direction the show is going? Let me know in the comments down below. Were you surprised by the supporting cast in this show so far? Let me know all your thoughts. DC, stop being this good, or I'm gonna start having more expectations from you. And today, I'd like to talk about My Adventure Superman Episode 4 and how it is not slowing down. It's still being so good, improving every episode. Even if you have some gripe, if you put it all together, it is doing so good and making us remember why we love Superman in the first place and why he is number one. I really like the fact that they are focusing more on different characters than just Superman, because Superman's cool, but he is not the only character in his life. There are so many characters we want to talk about, like Lois Lane, I guess, also like her dad. Like in this episode, we get into General Eileen being a very paranoid person because, of course, Amanda Waller is after him, and so he barricades himself in the house and tries to be very sneaky. But of course, Clark and Jimmy are not going to be as careful because one, Clark is Superman, and two, I don't think Jimmy really thinks Lane is being paranoid. And you could think that, but again, this guy is a literal general, and Amanda Waller is after him. You kind of need to be a little paranoid in that case. But coincidentally, at this point in time, Jimmy gets a nice little invite to Star Labs to talk about his experience and his knowledge about aliens because he knows Superman. And I love that they call Jimmy and Superman best friends, which is an interesting thing because it gets me into something that I really appreciate about this show too. The friendship between Clark and Jimmy, that they don't just treat Jimmy as like a one-sided friendship between Jimmy and Superman. No. They made it that Clark and Jimmy have been best friends since college and how that has grown. And it goes into something that I really want to talk about in a little bit in this episode. But this does get me into something that I'm genuinely kind of worried about because Clark has been trying to reach Lois, but she hasn't been picking up her phone, right? And knowing media, you kind of get into a point where this sounds like they're missing each other too much to the point where they break up, which is something I am generally worried about, and I do not want that to happen because I love the relationship between Clark and Lois, and maybe they may do a reverse card where this actually will get them to be together much stronger because this show has changed their expectation multiple times. I just hope that's the case because I don't want to see Clark and Lois break up, to be honest. And then going back on the friendship between Clark and Jimmy, I just love their friendship because there's something that a lot of people do not understand about Clark Kent and Superman. Clark Kent has technically a horrible sense of self-esteem a lot of times in his earlier years, mainly because he is an alien. Yes, he has made friends. Yes, he's super positive. Yes, but he is an outsider in multiple ways and others. He is a literal alien. He is an immigrant. He was not born from Earth. So in his eyes, he's going to see himself as different every day. That's why he has the alter ego of Superman to allow him to be the hero that he wants to be, but also allowing him to relax and be normal. Because what's so sad here is that you see Clark and Jimmy, going to Star Labs. Jimmy's like, I need you. And Clark's immediate thought is that, oh yeah, you need Superman, you need the knowledge of the alien. But no, that's not why Jimmy wants him there. He wants him because that's his best friend and that he does not care where Clark came from, which is a very nice sentiment that we need to see more of in Superman media. This is what people do not see when they are talking about Superman and his rogue gallery or his supporting cast. This is what's interesting. Yes, Superman has all the power in the world, but this is the real stuff that we like about him. Like, while they're at the expo, Jimmy talks about how he basically saved Superman's life so many times. And it's not the physical type of help saving, it's the emotional type of saving. He would basically help him out during college when Clark probably had to do some heroic things before he was Superman, or whenever Clark was busy. Jimmy was there to be his friend, allowed Clark to be social by taking him out. That is just amazing character development and friendship. But enough of that good friendship. Let's talk about something a little more in depth. The relationship between Lois and her dad, and how they shown that this type of relationship has been happening since Lois was young, and how it's gotten that bad because of Lois's mom passing away because she was sick. And that is sad because Lane has always tried to protect Lois because of what's happening. And seeing the backstory throughout this entire episode, it is horribly sad. And it shows why Lois is so good at what she does, why she's so, head first on things, because that's technically how she was raised by her dad. She's literally an army brat, which is a nice thing that's been around since the comics. That's why she's so good at a lot of things, and why she's so headstrong. That's from her dad. But that also can be a negative thing because Lane has been pushing her away so much, but it's giving her skills. Interesting, right? And that skills allows her to find her dad, which is trying to escape because, of course, Amanda's after him. And apparently he has a bunker that has a bunch of, weapons, which, damn, that's scary. But while they're trying to talk to each other, the freaking man himself, Damage, comes in and tries to stop them. This does make me want to make an entire video on this character himself, which I will whenever I have a chance. But I just love seeing this character more and what they're going to do with him. But basically, Lois's ingenuity saves them by going in the sewers. And Lane is trying so hard to keep himself in the distance, but Lois won't let that happen. And seeing this family dynamic is so sad, but so engaging. It doesn't treat you like you don't know who they are. It does. And it's so nice. But we don't need that niceness anymore because Atomic Skull is freaking after them. I can't get enough of the bad guys that they're introducing here. Yes, we've seen these bad guys before, but these are just good bad guys. But something that I did notice that now bothers me is that Atomic Skull is just closed while he's talking, which, why is that the case? Now I'm just really weirded out. So while the Lanes are trying to survive, we go back into Clark and Jimmy, being wholesome. And we get into the main reason why Jimmy is there. It was supposed to talk about Superman, but apparently it's so he can have a debate on whether if Superman is a problem, which gets me into something that I really want to talk about. But first, this whole thing was instigated by Lex freaking Luthor by showing us why we hate him so much and how his xenophobia-ness is infects everyone around him and why he is such a good villain. Just shave his head, make him a little muscular, and then we're good. But the debate is also kind of like what people think Superman is like. Because Jimmy is trying to defend basically his best friend for being a superhero, that he chooses to be good, he chooses to, help, he chooses to stop the bad guys. And Lex just kind of throws it out of the way because he doesn't know him. He basically goes and is like, yeah, Jimmy, thank you for using the word choose. What if he chooses not to be your friend anymore? What if he chooses to stop? So basically just hate mongering on the superhero, which is basically like a mouthpiece to all the Superman haters by saying, what if he stops being good? What if he this? That's a better interesting story, right? And it's so hard to watch because all the people are starting to agree with him because oh, what if we get a powerful tool and Superman thinks we don't need it? Or what makes him the authority on who's an actual supervillain? That type of mindset always bothered me. And that's why Lex Luthor is such a good villain. He is not a physical threat to Superman. He is an emotional threat. And again, this Clark is already self-conscious on being an alien in the first place. But now we go back into the two Lanes, going to this little pawn shop, right? Nothing unassuming. If you don't know who this character is here, Winslow Shot is the freaking Toy Man. If you don't know who Toy Man is a villain from Superman who turns, little unassuming figures like toys or action figures, whatever, and turns them into actual explosives or actual weapons, which we do see here later when Winslow sells out the General to Slade. Because in here we see that the teddy bear is an explosive. So we get all these new supervillains here. And do I think he's going to be a physical threat to Superman? Not really. But seeing all these people is such an awesome thing in different ways. And while the Lanes escape from Slade, they somehow go get into the Star Labs Expo. They're trying to survive by Damage and Deathstroke and Atomic Skull. And apparently the General is very mobile with his amazing fighting with hand-to-hand against a literal guy who has radiation as his power. And of course, while Damage was going to destroy them, Superman comes and saves him. And of course, there's this awesome fight that just makes it so fun to watch. And the only thing that the people see is the destruction, which of course that's the only thing they see. They don't see the heroicness. They see a mess, and they see that was all on Superman. And that already does a lot to Superman's self-esteem. And we actually get to see Clark and Lex Luthor actually meet and show Lex's douchebaggery more here. And I just want to see Superman throw this guy in jail. Do something. It's hard to watch. And this is all technically Jimmy's fault. Like I said, Jimmy inspired Lex, and that was not his best moment. Jimmy, why'd you have to be so kind to this man? And this is going so badly, right? It gets even worse. Clark is trying to go home to Lois, right? Trying to be with her to get himself to feel better. But we go into this trope that I just don't like at all. There's a misunderstanding. Because what happens here is that Clark is outside the window and is going to hear Lois and her dad talk to each other. And he basically says that he's weird and that Lois is like, of course, yeah, he is. And of course, Clark flies away. I hate this trope so much because it makes the most dumb decisions happen. Technically, it can make sense because Clark is already having a horrible self-esteem issues in this episode. And I guess that's a thing, but I don't want them to break up. It is a annoying and overused trope. So either they do a twist on this, or this show will probably get bad if they do that. It's really frustrating. So because of that, Clark, uses that tech that he wanted to talk to Lois first, communication with your partner, because that's what he heard. He just talked onto the machine and it flew in space. And it's so sad because all Clark wanted was family. And technically Jimmy betrayed him by helping Lex. All he heard from Lois is that he's weird. So all he has now is this potential other Kryptonian. And before this episode ends, we get to see Lex's handiwork on showing Superman being a villain because we see all these people go against him. We get to see Hank be against him. Well, we think he will become Cyber Superman. We see the General Eiling in here. Now, the only time I've ever seen this guy was from the Justice League Unlimited show when he turned himself into a Hulk-like creature in the style of Damage. But we get more things from Lex, and Lex is getting more control. So what do you think is going to happen in the next episode? I am very curious. Please let me know in the comments down below. So that was My Adventures with Superman episode 4. This was just a soap opera basically in this episode. We got to see the stories between the two lanes and their entire problem through the backstory between Lois and her father and why they separated after so many years. Why in the first season, Lois was very against talking to him, and now why she's trying to talk to him again. And we get to see the beautiful friendship between Clark and Jimmy and why they are best friends, why Jimmy is Superman's pal, and showing Lex Luthor make everyone against Superman again, which is going to be a problem because Superman will be their only chance. And this basically go into something that I don't like a lot of times when it comes to the Lex's idea. Yes, a lot of times Superman brings the bad guy he's in, but that if you think about this more than a second, technically that is not 100% true because Clark did not have any choice being brought to Earth. He did not have any choice with the technology coming to Earth with him. He had no control. So it's not his fault. But probably what the best thing that happened was the fact that he came to Earth because of all the technology. And apparently because Krypton was a warlike planet, which really bothers me still. But that's episode 4 of My Adventures with Superman. What are your thoughts? Let me know in the comments down below. DC, are you trying to break and revive our hearts every episode? Because I don't know if I can take it. And today, I'd like to talk about My Adventures with Superman, episode 5, and how it shows us how it can be heartwarming, sad, inspirational, fantastical, all in one, and is why we like superheroes so much. Like immediately in this episode, we don't have any time to waste. We go into Clark and Lois trying to immediately talk about what has been going on for the past few episodes of them just not being able to talk to each other. And I love that they just, point that out, that normally in shows, they would just make the two main characters just not know what to say in the sense of like, I don't want to talk about it. I want you to be in fault. I want you to be in fault. But no, in here, they immediately, anytime they have a chance, they will try to talk to you about because they're grown adults. They have responsibilities. Lois has her job, her dad to worry about, while Clark literally also has a job in the Daily Planet and also freaking Superman. So that's a lot of time to literally have. It's not because they're trying to avoid each other, unlike Jimmy that we see in this episode, but they are already trying to communicate. And because something happens, like literally Perry basically tells them to shut up, which is hilarious.
Hey, shut up and follow me.
But I like the fact that they went from that serious moment to something hilarious. And it goes to something really lighthearted because Perry wants Clark and Lois to, go into a bachelor and bachelorette type thing. And obviously we're going to be like, why would they want to go there? Oh, because Superman is going to be there. But why would Superman be there? Oh, because they're saving money for kids, which I love Clark's response here, because as soon as he hears that it's for the kids, he's immediately in on it. He's immediately there because that's the type of person Superman is. As soon as you see these little moments, you see behind the actions on why Clark is the way he is, why he is a very nice guy, why he's Superman. The only thing I really wish they do is, show more on his parents and why he's like that. Because this will go into something that I am weirded out by. But I just love the fact that Cat Grant is like such a diva. Like how she immediately goes onto the window and like, oh my god, that face was hilarious and terrifying. And I'm probably gonna put that in my thumbnail. But I just can't because she wants to go. She is the drama person for the Daily Planet, gossip and all that stuff. But it's so funny because this is for Superman, they have to make him look like he is single, which in concept makes sense, but in practice is very not good. Before we get into that stuff, we meet this lady, Kara. I love the fact that they finally introduced her in literally episode 5. That took a while, but I love the fact that she's already showing us how she is, stubborn, ready for action, but in a new way because of how this version of Kryptonians are raised and as warriors, which, honestly, I still do not like. But I've had to get used to it because I know what the kind of lesson they're kind of go for. That Clark, despite his alien heritage of being more warriors, he ended up being a good person, which, But we get to see that other side with Kara, with her literally about to fight a truck. And yes, I know Kara looks like Android 18, but I think that's kind of the point from what they've been showing in this show on how Krypton is shown. But I love the fact that Jimmy immediately comes and saves her. And it goes into something that I really like because of their immediate chemistry as we immediately see them. And I love that they're bringing back that attraction between Jimmy and Kara. They've shown it in the comics, they've shown it in TV live action shows, and they finally showed it in here. I really love that. And I love that technically Jimmy, being the first good person that she meets, is going to soften her up throughout this episode. And it's a funny thing how they do this trope of her not knowing what certain foods are because she didn't know what ice cream was. So Jimmy had to teach her what that was and if it tasted good, which is a big thing you see with like Wonder Woman specifically, where if she gets ice cream, oh my god, it's one of the best things in the world. But seeing those two try to connect past her needing information because she thought he was a literal leader of the planet just because he said he owned the Daily Planet. Very interesting. It shows the genuine chemistry between them and how good of a person Jimmy is and why technically someone like Clark would be very friendly with him. How a normal person can, make you feel so happy. Something like that. Besides all of that cuteness, we need to get back into some Superman action or the lack of action with Lois having to basically tell Clark that she's going to have to hide the fact that he's in a relationship with her because Kat was able to attend because she made Lois think that Kat knew who Superman was. But I can't, with the fact of how much they show Clark and Lois love each other so much. But that's just going to get some problems later on in this episode. So let's see how that goes. And also, that's technically your fault, Lois. That's all your fault. I'm sorry. Because in this Basher thing, they introduce a few characters and they're all right. But it's interesting to see that Kat already thinks that Superman has a secret identity because he never see him just out in the street just doing groceries, which is an interesting way to figure out that he has a secret identity. Because in this version of Superman, he doesn't have a Fortress of Solitude that everyone knows. He doesn't have a dog. He doesn't have a cousin yet. Anything like that. So that at that point, I understand. But we get into the Bachelors here. And we go into these characters here that the only one I know is Hank Henshaw, which they finally said his last name. But hold on. Wasn't he in a relationship? Because this was supposed to be single people. So either he divorced her or she's dead. I can't tell the difference.
Congrats on becoming a reporter. I wish we could catch up, but I'm leaving soon. Flying the wife to Paris.
But they also show the other characters that I have no idea. Silver St. Cloud sounds familiar. No idea who she is. But oh my god, that woman is thick. I can't. I love how Superman, is introduced here. Very nice. Very And I love that all the questions they're trying to give him are like, oh, what are you looking for in a relationship? And Superman's trying to, give his thoughts on what he sees as a good partner. Basically almost describes Lois, so he kind of has to go into a completely different thing. Tall lady. Oh, it's not that lady. Other lady's right next to him. It's so interesting because people are asking him like, oh, why are you so cool? Why are you so high? And Superman's like, very Superman thing to say. I don't see myself as just Superman. I see myself as just a normal guy. And of course, Mr. Hank Henshaw had to basically say, you are not normal. You are not human. You are an alien. And I love that the Silver St. Cloud is already defending him and how he saves. Lex has obviously indoctrinated all the people around him because Hank is already no, you may have everyone under your thumb, but I know the real truth. I'm like, god damn, slow down. Then we get to see Jimmy and Kara that he's actually trying to help her is very sweet. And it kind of brings them back to the Bachelor show thing. So it brings her into contact with, well, it almost gives her into contact with Superman, but Clark sees that Lois is being, upset, which I get it because the lady is flirting with Superman a lot. But I love that Clark's immediate thought is, hey, what's going on? Love the communication. But Lois is upset because of everything that's going on. The fact that because of this entire situation, these are supposed to be like, the best of the best people that are loved. And Kat is putting it in Lois's brain that Superman would want to be with someone who is as fantastic as he is. Which is very interesting because that's what I feel like people just focus on, the super part, not the man part, which Clark in this episode has tried to point out, which a lot of people tend to just see. It's like, well, what makes him so interesting? What makes him so interesting is despite all these powers, he decides to do good. And that's what people love about Superman, that the internal struggle is what we love about him. Because that's what this show kind of like pushes every time, that this guy has so much powers, he's going to end up betraying us. But Clark has multiple times just said, hey, I'm not trying to do that. I am just trying to help. But because of all the things Kat is telling Lois that, he'd want to be with someone better, he'd want to be with someone stronger, she is starting to get very self-conscious. And when she finally tells Clark about all that she is not, the best in her field, she is not the strongest, she is not the richest, she is not the biggest, it is wild because she also explains that, her dad's missing, the job that Clark didn't know. And then Clark is, also explaining that he tried to talk to her and that, he finally was able to do his beacon. But, she gets mad about it, which, Lois, you have no right to be that mad. But we can't handle with that anymore because Kara finally reveals herself as being his cousin and showing that he is weak compared to her eyes, which, god damn, Jesus. And Jimmy finding out that, she's an alien, which took you very long, my good sir. You literally lived with an alien for so long. You even knew that he was an alien before he told you. So I don't know what that's about. But it goes into this amazing fight where Kara gets into a battle armor, which I personally really love. I love how alien everything feels. I just love how cool and alien. That's what I like about it. I love the fact that the cape stays, which as soon as I thought about it, what if they take armor from this and give it to John Henry and they actually make him have the steel suit in this way because it's a little more slimmer. The cape is actually showing. I would actually love that so much. But the fight between them is just so fun because we see Superman caring about everyone. Every chance he gets, he tries to steer it to another place, somewhere where there's no people. But Kara is not caring. She is just trying to fight him, push him into knowing that he's weak, that this planet has made him soft, that she's here to enslave the planet, which is what I wanted to talk about. They have really just made this version of Krypton just the Viltrumites or the Saiyans from Dragon Ball, which is a weird thing because it goes into full circle. We go from Kryptonians just being a blank slate of people from a different planet sending into Earth to Dragon Ball, introducing the Saiyans, which are evil race of superpowered beings that enslave planets. Then we got Invincible with the Viltrumites, introducing them to being an evil race that's more prominent than it was in Dragon Ball. And then now, I guess Superman got inspired by that, making them, their alien race, a warlike planet, which, damn, that's a big circle to go into. But like I said beforehand, I don't like it, but I like the idea of what they're doing. They're making it that Clark, despite all his heritage, he is doing the best he can. And he was raised with good people, which I wish they did bring in his parents to show that love. But Kara is fighting him, even though she is clearly cared about Jimmy because she immediately calls him a distraction, which just hurts. But her suit just gets destroyed, right? I love that it's just a black version of like Superman's suit with red instead. And I've noticed that she has a Z on her chest instead of an S, which I wonder who her dad is in this version, even though they said it was Zor-El, I think. But we get to see Clark's new power. We get to see him finally use the freeze breath in a very anime way with the, the big circle, shooting out and hitting her. I originally was like really weird. It's like, oh no, they're giving him a laser power now? But no, it's just the freeze breath. That actually, it made my brain go from, hating it to loving it in a matter of seconds. I was like, damn, awesome. They keep fighting, right? And the action is just so action-packed. It's so amazing to watch. It's like the anime fights. So bombastic, so fast, so furious. And it didn't stop. But in the end, it looks like Kara won and trapped him. And this makes me think that maybe the Earth is going to be in so much danger that without Superman, they're going to realize the error of their ways. And because Clark is, off planet, so many of the bad guys are going to be introduced again to wreak havoc, and Task Force X is going to try to protect them. But we are probably going to get new heroes, like we're going to officially get Steel. We're going to maybe get Superboy. We're going to maybe get Eradicator, because there is still the Fortress of Solitude. And we may get Hank turn himself into Cyborg Superman to save people, apparently, because he already hates Superman. And that would be an amazing way to do the Death of Superman arc without actually having him there, or the Reign of Superman arc. But that was My Adventures of Superman Episode 5. This show has made me such a fan of what DC has to come. Now I have all the hope in the world, because again, this show started with a very minimal when the first season came out. It was good. I personally loved it, but they were still trying to put their footing on the animation side of it. It was kind of wonky, but this one they seem to bring out the best character models. And the drama here, it makes sense. Of course, it's a little more dramatized. Of course, people are not always going to make the right decision, but they make it in a smart way. And what I mean by that is they are not acting like they're children. They just don't have time. Again, adults just don't have time half the time when they're trying to do something. I love the anime inspiration in this show. I'm going to be first to say it. I've never really been a huge anime person. Not because I don't like it, it's just never been my cup of tea. But this type of style is really good to see in other media, like in here. But those are just my thoughts. What are your thoughts on the show? What do you think about everything that was introduced here? And what could happen? Let me know in the comments down below. Wait. No. You're actually doing that? You're bringing them in? And today, I'd like to talk about My Adventures of Superman Episode 6. And oh my god, they're going places that I did not expect the show would actually go into. Immediately, from the last episode, we saw Kara kidnap Clark, right? And then at this episode, it shows, him being in that little coffin thing that Kara put him in, and he immediately breaks out, right? But when he tried to escape wherever he was from, turns out they're in freaking space now. And that Kara seems very unhinged now, which you can tell that she's brainwashed just by the way that she speaks about, Krypton. But another thing that's also really weird here is that Superman's suit has a helmet for breathing. And I know that they've made it that this version of Superman's suit is actually a weird, Kryptonian techno suit type thing. And it is kind of weird, but the way they use it in this show just makes it seem like a costume, right? Nothing really changes besides, that magical transformation that we saw in the first time he became Superman. But in this one, apparently he has a helmet now, which that is interesting, because later we'll see he won't need it. But other than that, we see Clark, trying to escape, trying to find Earth. But because he doesn't know outer space, he kind of has to go with Kara. But it's also how she explains how Krypton was, how her father is helping her, and how she is going to introduce him to her father. And I love that Clark's response is, wait, there's more like us? And it makes him, want to go more now, which is actually very nice. But if you've watched this episode, you know who the father actually is. And one thing that's actually really cool is how Kara is able to, show Clark what Krypton was supposed to be like. They had this mind thing that allows you to unlock memories and things like that, which is actually really cool. And I love that everything is kind of Superman shaped with the headpiece here. But one thing that extremely bothers me is how they portray Krypton here. They show that people were able to fly. That bothers me so much, because now they're really going into the other evil, superpowered alien type trope where, they're able to fly, they have super strength and all that stuff. The reason why I don't like that at all is because Krypton was just supposed to be like an advanced version of Earth. That was it. That's the point of the Red Sun. The Red Sun made them just regular people who just happen to have better technology than human. But here, it shows that they could fly. So did they not have a Red Sun? That is my question, because later on in this episode, it shows that Red Sun energy does exist. So what is with this universe having the alien race just be like Viltrumite and Planet Vegeta? I am so confused here. But it makes me wonder, because what if this is all just not real? Because this is all Kara has known because of how she's played with these people and how she's called these holograms, plant civilian or, eating civilian. It's a really sad existence, because even Clark points that out, which you kind of feel more bad for her in here. And so Clark is trying to show Kara why he loves Earth so much, why he enjoys the people. with his own mindscape of showing his memories of him and his parents. And honestly, I find this entire thing very sweet. It's exactly what I was hoping in the last episode they would show on why Clark is the way he is, because they show Clark try to play with his parents. And of course, he has super strength, so he has to hold that back. The only problem with what Kara says is that she says that Clark is being siphoned. And what I mean by that is that like, he is being brainwashed to be weak, to not be a danger to them, and that they're hiding his true potential. Which, yes, they technically are, but it's for his safety, not for theirs. They're actively being with him like a normal person. They're not treating him like anything else. They've been with Clark since he was a baby, so they love him so much, not afraid of him. So this is an interesting take. But the way Kara diminishes Clark's experience as a person, makes him sad. So of course he takes it off, and he's going to a little thing which I actually want to talk about really quick. It's really cute. On how it's a little cupboard of items, and in there are pictures of Jimmy and Kara together, and that is so cute, especially on Clark's response on this, because when he figures out that she met Jimmy, as she calls Jimmy Flamebird, which is hilarious, he says my Jimmy, which is one really cute as a friend, and it shows their cousin dynamic when you can tell they're cousins, because he is teasing her, but because she doesn't understand certain human lingo, she kind of just thinks they're being literal. Which what is with like almost every alien species not knowing sarcasm or like lingo? I mean, don't get me wrong, I'm autistic. I have a hard time with that stuff too. But why is it every alien species? And it's still funny on how she still thinks that Jimmy runs the planet, and even Clark, points that out. It's really funny. And when Clark decides, look a little further into Kara's little collection, she sees little trinkets from other planets. And, you don't really think about it that much. And some of the planets I didn't really understand until she said Thanagar. So that means that the Hawk people exist. And they're increasing the world building of this show just by that simple line of like a planet. And it's also kind of sad by what happens later on. But I love that we may actually get Hawkman and Hawkgirl. Don't know who, because I prefer Hawkgirl, to be honest. But you can already start seeing the brainwashing Kara's been going through by the fact that she has to hide all these things because of her father does not approve of them. And it goes into something else because Clark and Kara decide to, go to the planets to, visit them. See, oh my god, look what the Kryptonian Empire did. They are able to, make the planets really good. But unfortunately, when they go to Thanagar, it is completely destroyed. And we have no idea why. Kara doesn't even know why. And you see the hooded figure get all upset and annoyed, and knowing that Kara does this often on going on her own. And of course, he doesn't like that because, as we'll see later, he is very heartless. But before that happened, I almost forgot to mention their adorable little like asteroid fight, I guess, because while they were going to the planet, before anything happened, they were stopped by an asteroid field, right? And Clark wanted to actually destroy them, move them out of the way. And he's like, "Oh, I need my helmet," that he showed in the episode. And Kara's like, what's with that? Like, oh yeah, the helmet. And I love that she kind of trolls him, showing them that they do not need breathing apparatuses at all. That, this version of Kryptonians can breathe in space. Because in a lot of versions, Superman can't. He does need a sort of astronaut type gear to be able to fly in space. But that's only in a long distance. He can hold his breath, do all that stuff. But this is actually really a really fun and interesting way to show that he doesn't need to breathe. And I love their little, playing around as cousins. That is so sweet. And we see Clark's new energy powers show up when she's trying to protect Kara from getting hit by a giant boulder. And it shows that technically this only happens when Clark gets worried about someone else. So what is it, like his form of a spider sense? It's an interesting thing. I'm not too sure if this is in the comics, if that's how it works, because it's kind of a newer ability that's shown. I'm not sure. But after that, we see them go to Thanagar, and, they both realize that it's, destroyed. And they're upset. They're confused, mostly Kara. And while they're being, worrying and that stuff, Giant Robots come and see them, right? And turns out they are Kara's father, and that she has been away from Kandor. And if you know who Kandor is, it is the bottled city that usually she lived in before a certain villain decided to come and get it. But in here, it doesn't seem like a city. It just seems like a giant, ship thing, which we'll get into who Kara's father is as they show that it's Brainiac. And I love and appreciate they didn't do the whole mixing them together, which I was worried about, that they would mix Zor-El and Brainiac together. But no, it looks like Brainiac made Kara think that he was her father this entire time. And all the brainwashing you've seen from Kara makes so much sense and what's been going on. And I love the actor's voice for Brainiac. It is so menacing and yet so robotic and inhuman. And honestly, I know people are not 100% fans on the design, but I think it works for Brainiac because it makes him look more like a robot and a computer at the same time. And that he still has the 3 little dots. That's all you need to know, that it is Brainiac. But that makes me wonder, what happened? Did Brainiac find Kara when she was being shot out into space? Did her pod also get a hit off course, which tends to happen in the comics, and that's why she didn't meet Clark until he was already Superman? So I'm really curious on what exactly happened here. But while Brainiac is trying to convince Clark that his mission is good, that he doesn't want to see Krypton become the one where it was a warrior empire, which also gets me into a thought that maybe Krypton was never actually a war planet, that maybe it was originally a peaceful one, and their planet was originally like the Krypton that we all know and love, but he came in control of Krypton and destroyed it on the inside to what he normally does, get data on the planet. That's what I'm thinking he's doing, but I could be 100% wrong, and that Krypton has always been a war planet in this version, which I still do not like. And while Brainiac wants to see what Clark can do, Clark accepts to show his abilities. And we see these 3 figures that are, technically robots of people that existed. But 2 of these I know. The first one I had no idea because it's just like a random alien. But the first 2 were a parademon and a Thanagarian. I just remember the alien species name. And that is fantastic. We get to see what in this version these creatures look like. And to be honest, they look awesome. Parademon looks like a parademon, but really cool. And we get to see what a Thanagarian looks like, and it's so fantastic. They look like they're warrior type people, while also going into the Egyptian type of thing that they're known for, an alien Egyptian race. Very nice. But then this rock type creature, I had no idea what it was. But before I get into that, I would love to say that I love that Clark just says these people, not these aliens, not these creatures, people, and that is a small way of showing what kind of person Clark is. But then it looks like that weird looking alien creature was a Green Lantern, as we see Superman getting punched by the construct, and you see the logo of the Green Lantern Corps. That is an amazing, awesome way to show another DC staple in outer space, because that's what I love about the Green Lantern, that they are a galactic police force. But they're also, it's sad because these are just the memories of the people that Brainiac decided to destroy. This makes me kind of confused though, because how does this creature have the abilities of the Green Lantern unless they took the ring for themselves, which also doesn't make sense because usually the ring will come off a person who dies and go into a new person. And it only works for whoever's chosen. So what is going on here? And I know they do different things in this version, so I'm not 100% sure what they're going for. It can go for a ring where it works just by taking it. I'm not sure. But it's so cool finally seeing another character or another version of a character here. And the world building here went from just Earth, oh cool, we heard stuff about Gotham, we saw about other places. And it's just so cool now that we're going into space. We got Thanagar, we got the Green Lanterns. That is awesome. But then we see Clark use his true potential, that electromagnetic field he technically has, to stop them. And it turns out that's what Brainiac wanted. He kept pushing him to show him that move. And he pulls out the red sun rays. And again, that's what weirds me out. Why is there a red sun if it shows that the Kryptonians can fly in the last showing of them? What is the deal? Because the red sun was never just supposed to be a weakness. That was just their version of their sun. That was it. So what is going on here? And it looks like Brainiac won. He took Clark, and it goes into Kara being basically bullied by Brainiac about how she's not doing the best things. You just want all the people to be dead. You don't care about them. But then because of that, kind of makes her snap into what's going on. Like she's just trying to figure out what happened because she figures out that Brainiac didn't destroy all the planets. It was her mind controlled, and we saw that kind of happening while she was in Earth fighting Superman. And that is an interesting thing. Is she vulnerable to that stuff? I am really curious. While Kara's, out in space just trying to figure out what's going on, she finds the ship. And it turns out, look what's inside. Looks like Lois and Jimmy are there. Well, with also Professor Brain and that gorilla person, which I still need to know who they are. That's how it ends. Dang. These episodes just keep increasing the risk, the world building too. It was mostly a Clark centric episode with Kara there. And I'm like, you are showing us way too much now. Now you're making us want more people. We want Batman, Flash, Hawkgirl, Green Lantern now. And I'm like, you could technically show that. You can make your own DC universe with this show, and you can do it correctly because you've already shown that you are having all these other people there. But those are my thoughts on the episode. What did you think of this episode? Did you like it? Did you not like it? Let me know in the comments down below. Did it make you excited for possible spin-off shows with having these characters be shown? You know a show is good when you're able to make the side characters the main characters in an episode, and it's consistently good. And today, I'd like to talk about My Adventures with Superman, episode 7, and how I am so surprised by the show that they were able to make an episode purely of side characters and make it as good as the last few episodes. Like, when I was watching it, I was like, yeah, where's Superman? But also, I would like to know more about these characters, and I love that this is the case. It's not a side plot, it's not a plot that doesn't matter. No, it actually does, and it leads into what happened in the last episode, like immediately. What this episode is basically what was going on during the time Clark was with Kara, and it shows that by how Amanda is taking over the city, by how she's saying, oh yeah, Superman's evil, how everything he did was bad, and now like she would even like suppress the news, and how it became a dictatorship basically, because it shows someone actually trying to defend Superman in his action and showing that she is hiding stuff, and it's like, oh, she's like, oh no, that's classified, you can't have that. We're gonna take you to prison now. We're gonna hold you. And I'm like, geez, showing how Amanda's evil and how she's gotten kind of power hungry, trying to protect the world. Because it's not like she's doing the exact same thing that the Kryptonians would be doing, invading, but in her own city, I guess. And one thing that I really love that they're showing, one is showing that Jimmy and Lois are watching the news and seeing what's going on, right? And of course, Lois is wanting to save Clark. She loves him so much, but I love that they point out how she knew she was dumb for trying to break up with Clark. And I love that Jimmy is not, like crucifying her for it. She's trying to be a supportive friend, which is, again, a very nice thing for Jimmy to do. And it's a good way of showing what kind of person Jimmy is in general. And you see Lois be completely desperate because, she feels bad about what she did to him. And then he got kidnapped by literally wanting to hire Livewire. Remember the villain that, almost tried to kill Superman and then tried to escape from him those few times? Yeah, they're trying to hire her now to rob an entire spaceship that we saw in the last episode for them to even get there. Jimmy's even like, what are you doing this for? And Lois is, upset that, she broke up with Clark and that she wants to make it right. And her desperate attempt is like so sad, but also kind of heartwarming that she shows that she can understand her mistake. So when Jimmy and Lois find Livewire in this like really interesting looking mansion thing, we see that she is with Heatwave, which I didn't know that that's who the character was. I didn't know it was a gender bent version. Like, yeah, she had the fire powers, but there's a bunch of people with fire powers, so I didn't put two and two together. But it's actually kind of cute in this case, showing that even the villains can find love. And I do not care that they are a lesbian couple. It should not matter. This is an entire new universe. Just so you know where I stand. This is cute, even if they're super villains. And this is where you see the whole gag thing of Jimmy losing money comes in, because they have to pay Livewire and Heatwave to go into the facility to get the rocket. Of course, he's gonna pay to find his friend, but you show how desperate they are by showing that Jimmy loses all his money by trying to save Clark, and it's so heartwarming, but also sad because that means Jimmy is no longer a millionaire. And also, I am kind of weirded out by that because the reason Jimmy got rich in the first place was because he sold his Flamebird company to the Daily Planet. But the weird thing about that is the fact that he could technically have gotten more money by making more videos, which this means that he just never did. Which, as someone doing videos online myself, that is terrible. You could have still been a millionaire if you kept making videos. Oh, but this is something that I really like, and it's callback. They decide to find a plan how to hack into the location to get the ship, right? And they don't have anyone specifically, right? So Jimmy invites the two cutest couples ever, Brain and the Monkey Man. I forgot his name, but that is so good that we get to see them again. They were hilarious last season, and I just think this is really cute how they are together. Like, it seems like they're kind of insane, but they're also kind of really good people. It's really weird. And I love that they actually show that these two are actually married here too, and it shows their little adventures. And Brain basically finds a version of him that is basically one of the robots from Doctor Who, which I think is a nice little reference. But they talk about their, strategy on how to get into the building, and it's actually really fun. It's kind of, that normal heist type film, because that's kind of what this episode is, but with, a talking gorilla, a living brain, someone who can control electricity, a very daring woman, and basically Jimmy, the fun-loving one. It's very interesting with this type of setup. And something that I actually find really interesting is the fact that while they're talking strategy, Lois is thinking of a way to neutralize Kara by the kryptonite that she had for a while from the last season. And it shows how Jimmy already cares about Kara from their first encounter, which is so sweet. But it actually shows how Jimmy was a really good friend to Clark by showing how he is a good friend to Kara by immediately trusting her the way he trusted Clark. While, Lois is acting like her own dad now because she was kind of a bad guy. But what Jimmy sees is really interesting. He doesn't see her as a threat. He sees her as someone who wasn't able to have a family to allow her to be a very good person. So that is actually very sweet and interesting on how they're going to keep with that. Okay, back to the plan that they were trying to go for, right? And they're actually trying to execute it. And one of them was to wait until one of the staff from the building is going to leave, right? And it turned out that he wasn't leaving. So Livewire was about to, end someone, but Jimmy did the most Jimmy thing ever and used his charm on the staff guy by basically making him leave by saying he's gonna, help him out, which, nice. This also shows that technically all the plans were not really going well, which is, a big trope in these type of heist films, that something goes wrong and then they have to improvise. Like, while the Brain and Monkey Man are, I'm sorry, that name is terrible, are trying to hack the system, it is not going well. And then when they finally do, no one was watching, which does no one have eyes? Because it turned out that the way Waller was able to figure out that they were hacking the system was the fact that there was a loop between the actual staff guy eating his donut. That's it. It wasn't the fact that they were trying to hack the system for so long. They were still being shown. No, it was a guy eating a donut that made it realize that they were hacked. And while they're realizing that they, messed up, they're trying to run away now from Slade. And I've never really mentioned his design here, but I honestly really like his design. They were able to cut his eye out, so that's good. And I know people keep calling him a twink. I'm not gonna say he's not, because he is. But I love how, sassy this man is. I don't know, I just find it funny. But it shows that, Waller is making Lex do this project called Project M. And you'll figure out what that is after, but they're online now. And he does the cool glasses thing that most anime people do with glasses, apparently. But it actually shows Livewire actually protecting Jimmy and Lois, which is actually a really funny thing to see a villain protect good people. But she's getting paid, so technically I kind of don't really feel that way for her. Because you see Leslie or Livewire kind of abandon them now. So it looks like while Slade is about to get Lois and Jimmy, and you would be asking, where are the Monkey and Brain? Aren't they supposed to help them? Well, it looks like they went on their own little excursion to get a little rock for portals. So it looks like Jimmy and Lois are on their own, and so they have to hide by going in the vents, and that's how they stay safe. But it also shows more of how Lois is feeling horribly guilty, as we've seen, and because of that, and she wants everyone to be safe, she's starting to act more like her dad. And I love that Jimmy is starting to ground her by showing the parallels between Kara and Clark, again, on showing that Clark had family while Kara really didn't. And that's why he's being the way he is with this situation, by not wanting to hurt her. And so they find the ship. And looks like they're gonna finally succeed, and unfortunately it looks like the machine is not complete. And they won't be able to stop them. So of course Lois goes into her pity party about, not missing Clark and how she was stupid for breaking up with him, which again I really like, because in a lot of shows they wouldn't do things like this, where they immediately regret it. And I don't know, maybe I'm so hurt by shows that just kind of make everyone act stupid, that this little amount of remorse shows makes me super excited. I don't know. But while she's doing all that, the monkey, I can't remember his name, finally actually shows up, and it turns out they were actually got more materials for the machine to actually build together, and didn't abandon them, which is again really nice. I love their relationship with them, and I love how they are all together, and it's so heartwarming and amazing. Again, all this stuff is happening without Superman in the room at all. But it looks like they have to hurry up now, because they're being chased by Project M, and these things are basically metals being fused with kryptonite, which, I'm going to be very honest, I don't like the design they've used for Metallo at all. The fact that these are just generic robots, blasting things, I don't like. The reason why I like Metallo in the first place was the fact that he was like, just a villain who happened to be super strong in a robotic body with kryptonite, and that's how he was a threat to Superman. But in this one, it just makes it a robot, so there's no emotion, no nothing to it. And the design is very generic. I get what they're going for, that it's supposed to be alien technology, but still, not my favorite design. What do you think? And it looks like they're actually being able to get past them, because the cute couple finally were able to, attack. They had weapons. They have anything to stop them. They covered the door to not get attacked. But unfortunately, it looks like the robots have finally grabbed onto them, and it looks like they're going to die because from the blast, which is so sad. It actually made me feel sad. I know they were going to die, but still. But Livewire comes back and comes in and saves them. Also, Heatwave shows up, and I thought this was amazing, showing that even villains can show remorse and how they aren't heartless. They can actually feel for the people, as we will see a little bit later on how they want to come back. Sorry about the light. I don't have a ring light to really work on this thing. But we see that it helps them get into space. And it looks like that reason why they even came back was the fact that Livewire heard that Lois was, being whiny, and she felt bad for her. And so did Heatwave, which, oh my god, this is so cute. This is the cutest episode I've seen of the Superman show. And I don't know, I think that just that type of stuff is something we need to see more of in our media. But so they get into space, and I love that technically the way they do hyperspace is basically just how they do it for Star Wars, which I always just love. Even though I am not a huge Star Wars fan, I'm like, that is still awesome to see. But it actually loops back to that point in the last episode where they actually find Kara by going to space. And it looks like the reason why I went so fast was because they lost control. So it was Kara that actually stopped them, which is actually very cool. Oh my god, that was an awesome episode. So yeah, that was episode 7. I love this show. The fact that they were able to make a episode full of side characters and make it fun and engaging without Superman, it is awesome, and a mystery to me on how they were able to do that. But that's just my thoughts on the episode. There are things I did not really like. I didn't like the fact that Metallo was basically a robot now instead of an actual person turned into a robot. But that's really about it. Everything else was really cool, and I'm really curious on how they're gonna show Kara, be a better person and learn from her brainwashing from Brainiac. That would be interesting to see, and see what happened to Superman in the first place. Oh no! Please don't do this to us. And today I like to talk about My Adventures of Superman, episode 8. And oh my god, they are not holding any punches now. Now they are just throwing us to the lion's den and seeing if we can survive. And it's a good watch, but it's just, oh my god, it's so much. Like, immediately, as soon as you go into this episode, we get to see what happened to Clark when Brainiac took him. It looks like Brainiac is trying to go into Clark's mind with this device called the Black Mercer. Now, if that sounds familiar, that's because in the comics, that was a flower that would make you have like the best dreams possible, that it almost seems very real. And they adapted that in Justice League Unlimited, where that happened to Superman. But in this one, it doesn't seem to be a flower that gives you good dreams. It seems to just be a memory thing where it goes into your mind. That's cool that it's a reference here, but I don't necessarily like that it's just another machine to go into someone's mind. But what do you think? Because I love the references still. But why does it have to be so spooky to get into his mind, though? And what I mean that this episode is just throwing you into the lion's den is the fact that the reason why Brainiac wants Superman and why he wants to trap him in his mind is because he wants to take over his body now. And I don't know why. It just seems really freaky hearing this type of plot, because that's never usually a Brainiac plan. Usually he just wants to, collect civilizations, but I never thought of him wanting to be someone. I mean, it makes sense, trying to be the most powerful person. And hearing Brainiac's, coldness in here is like extremely spine-chilling because of how much of a robot he is and how he doesn't care at all. Like Clark is saying he doesn't want to do it, right? And Brainiac's like, yeah, like you had a choice, but in a very robotic way, and it's so unsettling. But it's actually really interesting how Brainiac is trying to find his weakness. He's just trying to go through his memories and seeing what actually hurts him. That's an interesting way to, find someone's weakness. But as we see in this show, there technically isn't any, at least from what we know, besides kryptonite. But before we get into more of what's going on with Clark, we finally get to see Kara meet Lois, Jimmy, Brain, and the monkey. Still have to remember his name. And it's one of the most awkward and funniest things ever, because as soon as Kara realizes that Jimmy's there, she's immediately blushing. And I love that they're already just showing that they like each other. There's no like wishy-washy stuff. Yeah, they're kind of being a little bit like that, but they immediately show that they're already interested. They're not being like, oh, I'm not sure how I feel about you. No, they're just saying, you know what, I'm interested. And that's adorable. But on the other hand, we get to see Lois be completely stone cold to her, because what she sees is someone who kidnapped basically the love of her life, who she dumped again, by the way. And it's really funny because of how Jimmy is just being very comforting. He's saying like, come into the ship and we'll talk. But again, Lois is being like, no, we can't do that. And you know, she's already there. But it's really cute, especially how Jimmy and Kara just look at each other. But it's really interesting because Kara is, you know, saying that Clark is in trouble, but she's still thinking that her father, Brainiac, is good and that he's malfunctioning, which, no, he's just being the way he is, just completely monstrous. And speaking of that monstrous, we see Brainiac try to test Clark more with every memory he's in. Like, showing his memory with Livewire, he gets very confused on how Clark was just able to stop her, but, you know, also help her. And it baffles Brainiac, which is always awesome to see that villains are, you know, confused by Clark's kindness. But while they're looking through Clark's memories, they figure out that the reason why Clark gets so strong isn't just because of his pure strength, it's because of his indomitable willpower that's probably from Earth, and that he gets all the strength because he's trying to protect Lois and Jimmy, and Brainiac finally figures out what to do. But this does get me into something that I'm really weird on, that, yeah, they're focusing on that he cares so much about Jimmy and Lois, but it doesn't even show his parents, you know, the people that literally raised him. You know, the reason why he's this good man that Lois and Jimmy tend to gravitate towards. So the fact that they weren't even shown at all in this episode to even, like, you know, show memories of him here, of his backstory with when he was a kid, is really weird to me. But before we keep going with that, we get to see the gang trying to figure out a plan to save Clark. And it's really, you know, like, it works, right? Because they have the two smartest people there. And it kind of also shows again that Lois does not trust Kara, while Jimmy has literally every faith in her. And it's really cute because of the way they interact. Like, what we finally, first of all, we finally get to see the spacesuits that we saw in the promotional image for this season. I still don't know why it has cat ears, really, but it looks cool. And we also get to see Kara try to reveal her feelings to Jimmy. But because of how awkward it is, it's actually kind of a funny awkward, because she kind of backtracks, and she loves the mission that he's on, because again, she still thinks that he is the leader of the planet, and Lois finally gets to figure that out. And I also love that how she teases Jimmy about that, which also shows their, you know, friendship and why they are all good friends. But back with Clark, Brainiac figures out how to get in his head, even though he technically already is in his head, by hitting him in his best weak spot, his feelings. Because we've seen that this Clark has a big problem with how people perceive him. Not that this is bad character-wise for Clark. This is technically how he is when he first becomes Superman, because he doesn't feel completely complete. Because he feels like an alien. What's been going on with in this past season really makes his anxiety and his fears more warranted. Like when Jimmy basically gave the idea to Lex that on how to trash Superman, and that General Lane would say that Clark is weird, and Lois basically agrees with that, but even then he didn't hear that she said she loved him for that. So things like that, small little things, do tend to affect him, especially at a time when Lois broke up with Clark. So all that horrible feeling is starting to get to him. But what I love here is that he's trying to power through that his emotions do not make him weak. They make him who he is. And I feel like this would have been much better if they at least showed his parents, you know, again, the reason why he is the way he is. Because without his parents, everything we love about Superman would not exist. That is Superman's real power, that he has an indomitable willpower that can't be broken. But again, this is a younger Clark. This is a more emotional one. So it's still pushing through, because guess what? Brainiac is starting to mess up the memories, trying to make them something they're not, by trying to make it that Lois and Jimmy are saying horrible things about him, which never really happened, but because Clark is already feeling horrible about himself, these are starting to get to his head. And it feels like someone who has anxiety now. Things that never happened, but are starting to go through the actual things that happened and start to feel real. And it's so sad. But while Clark is beating himself up for his memory being screwed up, his real friends are actually trying to save him. So they're trying to figure out where he is, what's going on. And it looks like Kara finds him, or at least finds Brainiac with him. And Kara finally figures out what's been going on. That, it's because of Brainiac that she destroyed Thanagar and those other planets. And it's his fault for why there's no real empire. And then the fact that he keeps diminishing her every time, just calling her disappointment. I don't think a lot of people realize that sometimes just those words can hurt so much more than actual fists, because it's internally, which I think this episode is trying to show that you can have all these powers, but if you're not emotionally strong enough, it will hurt. And it shows how Brainiac does not accept Clark's humanity, because when Kara was trying to say, "What are you doing to Clark?" Brainiac gets all pissed off and says his name is Kal-El. Like, it's like a horrible thing to hear him be called his human name, which shows how much Brainiac is so detached. I mean, he is a robot. And we see the internal struggle between Clark and Kara. While Kara is trying to fight Brainiac physically, Clark is trying to fight Brainiac mentally. And it looks like they're working. It looks like they finally are able to get out. And it looks like Clark actually gets out and, saves the day. But unfortunately, this was a lie. This was actually something that Brainiac constructed to make Clark, at ease, make him more vulnerable by showing Clark the life he wished he had in Krypton with his family all being alive. And it looks like Brainiac wins. And he takes over Clark's body. And it looks awesome. And like one of the most anime antagonists I've ever seen. But one thing I actually find really funny is they kind of do the reverse on how the costumes work. Because when a Brainiac changes Clark's suit to whatever he feels comfortable with, it's actually just less clothing, which is a reverse of how they usually do armor in most media, of the woman having almost no armor, while the men have literally a full body amount. But in here, it's switched. Brainiac is controlling Clark's body. He has no armor. Kara is literally covered almost everywhere. So I just find that extremely funny and actually really cool. Brainiac does look a little goofy, but cool at the same time. And it's really interesting on how he's, fighting them all. But Kara will not let this stand and is trying to stop Brainiac in Clark's body as much as she can. But he is a robot with no emotion and can't get tired. So he's using all of Clark's strength without holding back to fight her. Jimmy tries to use kryptonite, but because, again, Brainiac is piloting Clark, it doesn't affect him as much because he can just switch to another body. Jimmy has to stop because it's also hurting Kara, but that kind of gives Brainiac the edge, and so they get thrown out into space. And I like the little detail of the fact that their helmets just go back on when they are taken out, but that just means that Brainiac seems to win. But it looks like there's some hope, because it looks like Lois is going to go back into Clark's mind to fix it. Because what Brainiac did was make it seem like Clark grew up in Krypton and had his family there, and that's where he was accepted. So it actually looks like they were able to make this version of the Black Mercer, the one in the comics and in the animated show, something that puts you in a dreamlike state of the best life you can possibly live. So what I think is going to happen is that Lois is going to have to go in there, find the young Clark, and try to remind him on who he is, that he is not a menace, he is not a monster, he is a true hero, that he is a good person, and that she loves him so much and never wants to let him go ever again. And I think that would be amazing. But that was the episode. That was My Adventures with Superman episode 8, and I cannot stop loving this show. I can't not recommending the show. If you have not watched this show and have been watching it through me, one, thank you, I really appreciate it. But two, please go watch it for yourself. It is a treat just watching, seeing a positive Superman come to light. Even though this episode is basically showing that the bad guy takes over his body, it's still really good that his will is what pushes him, even if it didn't succeed at this point in time. It is still awesome to see. But what do you think about this episode? What do you think of that they changed the Black Mercer to an actual memory thing? What do you think about the suit? Let me know in the comments down below. We are in the penultimate episode, and I am so excited for what's to come. And today, I'd like to talk about My Adventure Superman, episode 9. I can't believe how good this season has done. Because from my point of view, there really hasn't been many misses. Like in the last season, there was a lot of hit or miss. But in this one, they've looked into the show, they've seen what works and what doesn't, and they've been making it better. Now, I know some of you are going to say that him being extremely cheesy and, the way the show can be cheesy is a bad thing. I think that's like the best part of the show. Like, yeah, it can be a bit much, but it's so heartwarming to see good positivity and also a good representation of Superman. That he does not see himself as a god, he does not see himself as above everyone else, he just sees himself as a person, as this episode shows. Because as soon as we get into the episode, we go back into the mindscape that Brainiac created for Clark so he can, keep his body. And we see what Clark would think that living on Krypton would be like. He'd be wearing, the white uniform with Kryptonian symbol, but he'd also have the raggy hair when he was Clark in Earth, not the Superman haircut that he has. And we get to see Clark's kindness throughout this, and even in the beginning, like we see Clark feeding this little creature. But one thing that I find really cool about what this species is that it's a sun eater. Now, if that sounds familiar, that's because I know that creature from All-Star Superman, from the comics and the movie, and it's supposed to be a creature that eats suns, either if it's baby suns or big suns. But in this one, they made it more like a dog creature, to kind of fit in. It's an animal type thing. And it shows Clark's kindness to this little creature. But then, I guess in this version, his mom is trying to say that, why are you trying to talk to this creature? Why are you trying to do any of this good stuff? And you can tell this is the mindscape because of how the mom is saying that is not good or something. The voice is weird. And one thing that I actually find really cool is that Lois actually was successfully able to go into Clark's brain, with the Black Mercer. But unfortunately, it kind of looks like she kind of forgot who she is, and the evil Jor-El captured her. Which was my worry, because it's part of a trope where, they forget who they are, and then the person finds out who they are by finding the loved one, and it takes a while. But, as we see in this episode, that's not really the case. But, before we get into more of that stuff, we go back to Jimmy and Kara, back to where they were. The fact that they basically lost because Brainiac took over Clark's body. And looks like they're trying to take care of Lois since, she kind of just impulsively went into Clark's mind. And, Kara is, thinking how hopeless it is that they can't figure out a way to stop him, and, all that stuff. Because, to her, that was her father that literally betrayed her, and just showing that he never cared about her. While, this is something I really like, that Jimmy is being completely, hopeful. Even if things seems messed up. He even says that he's tried hopeless before, but he's persevered through that. And I love that. Love that Jimmy is the voice of optimism, that even though Kara's freaking out, he's there to reassure, and he has a plan to try to help in his own Jimmy way. And his way of trying to help is so awesome. Again, it's showing the positivity of social media in this case. Because in this one, looks like Jimmy still has an audience, still having Flamebird, which means he still has people to talk to. And that's his way of helping, by asking people to help. But unfortunately, looks like Amanda is already after him. Because remember, Amanda has a watch over the city, a dictatorship. So she's trying to shut down any news that could, make them see bad. So that's what she does. She basically shoots him down. And if it wasn't for Kara, they would have been dead. But it still looks like Amanda was able to arrest them, because looks like Amanda has read some radiation somehow and kryptonite. Which one? Why does she have so much kryptonite? In the last point, it looked like Slade only had a sliver of kryptonite. And this will go into something that I have more questions on, but in a little bit. But it looks like Amanda was able to capture Kara, Lois, and Jimmy. But if you look here, looks like Jimmy was still recording, and that's going to come in handy. But before we go into that, we go back to Clark's mindscape, where the fake Superman parents are interrogating Lois. And because Lois, in this, I guess right now, does not remember who she is, she can't give them any answers. Even though they keep asking her, who is she? What's going on? All that jazz. But while the fake parents, try to figure out how to keep her at bay, while Lois is alone, Clark comes and sees her as Kal-El, I guess, which is a weird way to say the name. But he comes and talks to her and, tries to be friendly, very easy to talk to, which is very much, Superman, very much Clark Kent. And it's so sweet on how they talk to each other. They immediately, the way, they talk to her, even though they have no idea who they are at this point because of the mind wipe. They still act like each other. Lois being, very upfront, sassy, Clark being very nice and kind. It's a very good mix or clash at this point. And this actually is something that I actually really like. They immediately fix the whole not remembering the person thing very fast. Because immediately we see that when they shake hands, Lois gets all the memories of them together extremely fast. It doesn't have the Clark, but it's so good that they don't dwell on them not knowing who they are for a long time. And since Lois figures out who she is, she immediately tries to tell Clark what's going on, who he is, that he's not actually on Krypton, all the jazz. But of course, Clark, as Khaled, doesn't really know that she's saying the truth, because to him, this entire situation has been his entire life in his mind. Of course, the evil parents are, trying to, stop her, tell her to stop. And so they try to reset everything to remove Lois. But it looks like she can stay back. Before we get to more of that, we go back to Waller when she kidnapped the gang. We see them, driving and all that stuff. But the news, the Daily Planet, comes to the rescue, which is so nice, showing that people have their backs on this show, that people can be trustworthy, which is a very nice thing to, one, teach kids and show us adults who are very cynical that people can still trust each other and help, as we see here. Because one thing that I really like, again, is that Jimmy's live stream was still on. So they were able to figure out that the gang was unlawfully arrested. And I love that Vicky's here too, that even though we've seen her, kind of be the rival to the Daily Planet, she's still here to help, which is a very nice thing to see, that she is very complicated. And as we see that the Daily Planet is kind of just distracting them, because Steve, thank you, Steve, is here to rescue Lois, Jimmy, and Kara. I love that so much here. But before everything is so sunshine rainbows, looks like Brainiac has come down to Earth to, invade. And I know we've already seen the craft of, Kandor, but to me, this kind of reminds me of the Man of Steel ships that we saw in that movie. And there will be points in this episode that remind me even more to that movie. And I'll explain it when it gets there. But we get back to, the Mindscape, as Lois is having this entire conversation again with Clark. Because apparently, she did not get erased. But Clark's so-called parents come back to stop him from learning the truth. So he tells her to send him away so the fake parents can try to figure out why she wasn't erased completely. And it's probably because Lois and Clark are very linked together. At least that's my theory, because they don't really ever explain it that well. But Clark comes back to, give Lois food, which is very nice again. And Lois is again trying to explain that these are fake parents, but then, she gets erased again. So they get sent back to that exact point, and they have to start this entire thing over again. So it's kind of like Groundhog Day for her, because we see her do this over and over and over again, but it gets funnier each time. But Lois actually tries to figures out a way to get her and Clark alone, basically in the place where she spawned in all the time, like video game. But I don't really necessarily know how she got all the way over there and came all the way back in this amount of time for evil Jor-El to not find her. It's really weird. But Clark finally remembers kind of who she is, and Clark hears that it's Lois, but doesn't think it's her because of their breakup, and so he thinks this isn't real. And I find it funny the way he finally figures it out by seeing Lois in her pure form of, getting angry, getting sassy, getting, up in his face on him not believing her. And he finally remembers, because he says on how dangerous that actually is for her. And it's like that amazing point in a relationship where, he's very worried, she's very abrasive, and will show how much she cares in this amazing way, because she has said that she, stole the spaceship, went down to space just to find him. And that's how Clark figures out that this is real. And I love that. But since now Clark knows everything, the evil parents don't have to play around anymore. And so evil Jor-El goes after Clark. But Clark doesn't save himself. Lois does. Apparently she has superpowers now. But before we get into the rest of that coolness, we go back to Brainiac about to conquer Earth. And before he was doing this, we saw Jimmy and Kara, talking to each other because, she's feeling terrible about, the fact that she ended worlds under Brainiac's control, and she's feeling hopeless. And of course, Jimmy is trying to help her, trying to make her feel better. And what's funny is, who makes her feel better and how that she's actually a hero? Steve. He explains that, she is the cousin of Superman and how he has taken beatings multiple times and has still gotten up, because that's what she was feeling bad about. He was basically telling her that she is a hero for abandoning Brainiac. And I just love this positivity and this reinforcement in this show. It is so good. But again, Brainiac is about to conquer the planet. But Amanda Waller is not going to stand for this, because even though she is a complete douche, she still kind of wants to protect the planet, so she uses all her supervillains to fight him. But because this is Brainiac in Clark's body, he whoops their butts so easily, which shows that Clark is also holding back a lot. So none of that helps. So Kara actually comes up to stop him, because she finally figures out that she needs to stop Brainiac. And of course, Brainiac is demeaning her a lot, which, damn, he is really trying to step on her. But she does not care anymore. She is ready to protect this planet, which sounds familiar. I can't remember exactly why this sounds familiar. I'll probably put it in post, but it's really cool. But before, there was some really cool fighting between Brainiac and Kara. Looks like Lex activated the robotic Metallos, and apparently they all have kryptonite. Again, where did they get all this kryptonite? Is it synthetic kryptonite? Because, again, there was only a sliver of it from the last point they saw it. So I'm not sure how they were able to use that. Is it can the actual just radiation of kryptonite work on everything without actually having the physical thing? I am so confused here. But it seems to be affecting both of them. But back into Clark's mindscape, where, Clark had the strength to punch evil Jor-El, we figured out the reason why she's this strong is because, one, this is Clark's mind, and two, he does not see her as weak. He sees her as the strongest person he knows, which makes sense because, Clark, can go into dangerous situations and, be fine. But Lois does the exact same thing to get to the truth. And that's why he says she's very strong. And that's why in this mind, he sees her as the strongest person. That is awesome. That is sweet. That is kind. Because they even, confess their feelings to each other again. And we get to figure out why she called Clark Superman. Well, her reasons is that she called him that because of his heart and his kindness, and because that's who he is, which I think is very true. But I also think that it's because of the power. Even though she says it's not, I also do think it's because of the power. But still, it's very sweet because they make up, and it's really nice. And this is what I mean that some people may not like because of the cheesiness. This part is extremely cheesy, and I kind of, felt that it was a bit much, but I also loved it so much. And we see that their kiss brings out Superman again as Clark gets his costume in there. And I find that really cool. I wish he did hit that magical transformation again, like he did in the first season. That would have been really cool. But other than that, we see that, they both are able to fight all these evil Kryptonian soldiers and, his evil parents. They actually try, to destroy this, mind world by, hitting the ceiling, because I guess there is a ceiling in this world, which their love, which is represented in their punch getting out there, wins. And we see that they go back into the real world. Lois is able to get out, tries to find Clark, tries to figure out where he is. Clark finally gets his mind, and he gets out of it, but, he still has kryptonite on him. Also, I love that little, effect where it's to the negative effect. That's really cool of showing that, he's back. But I actually kind of find this part extremely funny because Brainiac gets extremely salty. He acts like a child having a tantrum here. One, because his doesn't even sound real because, he's a robot. I don't think he can do that much emotion. Which I know some people are going to say that sounds really flat. I think that's the point. But he said, for this insolence, your planet will get destroyed. And just the way he does it is extremely funny. But it turns out that he had kryptonite shielding, which becomes white, which then makes me think that the regular white Fortress of Solitude that Clark had is actually filled with kryptonite shielding. But does this mean that Brainiac had it the entire time? Why didn't he use it beforehand? Yes, he was in Clark's body, but the kryptonite still affected him. So why didn't he have it beforehand? He could have just had that there. Because we see he just, takes out all the robots that he's had, that fight Clark, and give them all shielding. And this is where the Man of Steel references kind of keep going. Because Brainiac, is going to destroy the planet. So he decides to beam this laser down, reminds me of Man of Steel. You may be saying, that must be the coincidence. Yeah, I thought that too, until Kara went up there to shield the blast from coming even more down. And the way that happened reminded me of that scene from Man of Steel where he did that. Even though I'm not a fan of Man of Steel, I still love all the references they give it to it. And Brainiac is ready to give another blast. And Kara's ready to sacrifice herself. But before that happens, Clark comes out as Superman, and he's got a new suit. And I am very 50-50 on the suit, exactly. For one, I love that doing more Superman things are having the yellow outline, like the Max Fleischer Superman logo. They're doing that with the new Superman movie, and it looks like they're doing it in here. Now, I don't like the gold on the arms, but I do like it on the boots, because I don't know, it just adds more to it. This is the part where I don't like, and some people may like it without it, but it doesn't have the trunks. It has the gold belt, which is a reference to Man of Steel, which I feel like they're doing more of that here. And I would be really mad But it actually gives me a little theory that because in the original suit he had, it didn't have a belt or trunks. If you look back at the original episode where he has that magical transformation, there was nothing there. It was just the blue. So his mom created the belt and the trunks. So I'm thinking that maybe his mom is going to add a yellow belt and trunks to this suit. But that's just my theory. And I really hope that's the case because I do not like when Superman does not have trunks. It always looks really funky. But Superman's back, right? So it looks like everything's going to get better. Yeah, no, Brainiac takes over the Talos. So that's not a good thing anymore. And that's the episode. Clark and Kara get fueled with kryptonite. So we get to that point. I'm very curious what's going to happen in the next episode. First, I hope they gives them the trunks. But two, I am not 100% sure what's going to happen. They have to end it. But how are they going to do that? They could do a cliffhanger, but I don't think they would do that. I don't think they have a conclusion for a next season. I don't know. But that was My Adventures Superman episode 9. I can't believe we got to see so many cool references to other Superman stuff, and we get to see Superman with a completely new suit. I am so excited for the final episode. I don't know what they're going to do. I'm just going to be sad not talking about this show for a bit, unless I make an entire retrospective on the season. I don't know. But what do you think? Did you like this episode? Did you like what they were doing with it? Did you like what they did with the Black Mercer? Did you like what they did with the references? And did you like the suit that they have for this Superman? Please let me know in the comments down below. They really outdid themselves with this season finale, and I think it paid off. Hey there, this is your Matt Doodle with Thomas Hands. Doodle here with another video. And today, I'd like to talk about My Adventures Superman episode 10. It's been a trip to talk about this season, from its high highs to its low lows. And even though I've been praising this show for being better than the last, which again has been so much better, it's still not 100%. There are still some things that I don't necessarily like that I will talk in this episode, but this show has been so fun to watch no matter what. And before I get into the actual episode, for those of you who have been watching me from the beginning or at some point in the middle, right now I'm not currently home, so I can't really show my screen. So for the time being, I am using this PNG for those points where I don't really have a clip to use. Let's see how that works. But let's get into the actual episode now. Like, we immediately go into the action. There is no hesitation. We see Brainiac's invasion and how petty this machine is. He honestly acts like a child when he can't get what he wants. And it's funny because he's, super powerful and can back it up. But you know how serious this episode is when they don't even have the intro at all. It's just the My Adventures Superman logo. That's it. And we see Amanda actually try to stop him because even though she is a big douche, she still cares about the Earth, supposedly. But it shows that gray side that Amanda has, that she may not like anything outside of Earth, but she still cares about the Earth, supposedly, usually under her control. And we see Hank in his plane, because he's a fighter pilot, try to stop Brainiac as well. But it looks like him and his team get blown up. Now, normally that would be like the end of a character, but his literal name is Hank Henshaw, and in the comics, of course, he becomes Cyborg Superman. So I'm not sure how this could happen, but I would really like to have that to happen because I've said that multiple times. We also get to see Lex's cowardness. Because, again, Amanda is trying to stop the robots, and she is trying to talk to Luthor if he's going to do the same, and he just runs. Probably going to make himself look better than everyone else, but is going to run for the time being. But then we get to go see Steve, Jimmy, and Lois and see how they're doing, which seems not that good because they are getting chased by one of the Metallos that are controlled by Brainiac. And it looks like they get destroyed until John Henry Irons comes back with his steel armor. And I still don't like it. They have not changed anything about it, which kind of made me upset or annoyed because I had a few commenters say that he's going to upgrade his suit, to make it more sleek, to make it look more like the steel armor that, well, personally, I really love, with the symbol, the mask, and the cape. But no, it's still that giant bulky mess that he had beforehand. And for those of you who say that he could just, have a secret identity and put on the armor in the next season, well, now he can't, because it looks like he's in a part of a team with some of Superman's older villains from the first season that people had a lot of disagreements with, because they were basically just people in robotic suits that gave them their powers. Why I praised this season was the fact that they would, sometimes have some robotic bits, but the majority was that their powers came internally, metahumans. He came back with the robotic armors, with those people that we saw in the last season. The only one I remember is Banshee, and that's about it. We got the strong guy, we got the invisibility guy, first we got Livewire and we got Heatwave in a team, and they all got armor. But one thing that's really cool is that they were there to save Superman, because, him and Kara were going to get blasted by one of the robots. Now, one thing I do actually like here is that the General is actually the leader of this group, the Resistance. And this is a group that was formed because of Superman's positivity, that they grew to understand what he was about and how him helping them made them better people, which is actually a thing I actually really like here. Never mind the bad suits and robotic parts. I love this messaging. So when they all recoup, they actually all decide, to go to Brainiac, to stop him. Or at least that Superman and Kara are going to, and that the Resistance is going to fight the robots and give them time. But while Clark and Kara finally get up to Brainiac's ship, they find out basically Brainiac let them, so he can control Kara and turn her into the Eradicator. So I technically have 1 point there. Well, actually 2, because I did say they were going to introduce the Eradicator and Steel in this season. So technically I was right. Like, we're going to officially get Steel. We're going to maybe get Superboy. We're going to maybe get Eradicator, because there is still the Fortress of Solitude. And we may get Hank turn himself into Cyborg Superman to save people, apparently. Maybe not in a full way, because, Kara is the Eradicator and more mind control in this way. But still, right? And we officially find out that Brainiac is the one that destroyed Krypton, which I kind of guess, because in a lot of cases, that's kind of what people think happens. Also, it's always funny to see how old Clark is by when Krypton was destroyed, which in this case, he was 22. And I really love the animation that's going on in this episode. Like I said, they're really going all out. They really went all anime on this episode by making it so smooth and detailed. Like, this specific shot in this episode is one of my favorite of Brainiac. I don't know why, it's just so cool. But not just Brainiac's animation style, it's also everything that's going on in this episode. Like with Kara being the Eradicator at this point, she is going all at it at Clark, and it looks so beautiful and stylistic and so appealing to the eyes. But it also shows how good Superman is. Because what I love is not the fighting, not the big bombastic battles. These are fun, don't get me wrong, I love them. But that is not why I like Superman. I love that with all that power, all that strength, he's the most gentle person ever. Especially in this case, Clark wants to rip his throat off. But no, Clark is trying everything in his hand to find Kara in there and bring her out. And we see that love is what makes Superman want to do better. And we see that actually work. Because while Kara is trying to fight Clark, while he's trying to avoid everything, they land on Earth. And Clark is still trying everything he can to not fight his cousin, while Kara is trying to rip out his throat, and he does the most cheesy thing possible and gives her a hug so tight she can't move, while he has to keep explaining to her that he loves her, he cares about her no matter what. And it's kind of sad because we see in her mind what she's been through this entire time of Brainiac bashing her, telling her she's a disappointment ever since she was a child until up to her adulthood. And it's really hurting her because all she's seeing is her father, Brainiac, calling her a disappointment, which can really mess someone up. Because, again, she was with him her entire life without Clark's love or any of the Kent's love. But then she also hears Jimmy and Lois's voice screaming out, showing that they even care. Even Lois, who, again, has shown she did not like Kara at all. But hearing Jimmy makes her feel better, or at least try to get out of that trance, and it's so awesome. And we finally see her break out of that control. And Kara and Clark together finally take the Candor and take it into space to the sun, which will get me into something real quick. But first, something wild happens. While Clark and Kara take the ship into space and into the sun, Brainiac does something drastic. You remember that kryptonite he took while he was in Clark's body a few episodes ago? Well, he still has it, and uses it as his trump card. Since if he can't have the Earth, no one can. He'd rather destroy himself and the last Kryptonians. Very petty of him. But I am very weirded out on how he's functioning at all, because he is filled with kryptonite right here. So wouldn't that be horrible for him? As we've seen, Kryptonian technology cannot be compatible with kryptonite. So I don't know what's going on here. How is he even functioning? But we get to see Brainiac use his ship to blast the Kryptonian ray down at Superman. But Kara protects him and takes the blast instead. But then she falls into the sun. And of course, in traditional Superman fashion, he comes in and saves her. And then they figure out that the sun gives them a boost, which gets me into something which I want to talk about. Why did it take him this long to figure that out? Because in the first season and this season, it was never revealed that the sun did anything to give them their powers. It didn't show that the sun gave them the ability to fly or have their abilities, as we've seen that Kryptonians could fly and had super strength like every other alien version of them. So in this version, it looks like the sun just gives them a power boost. That's it. It's cool. It takes away kryptonite, which is, what happens. I just wish it was implemented better, that the sun would slowly give them more powers instead of it just kind of happening randomly, and then it's, the power of the heart that gives them their powers and, them being better. I don't know. It just feels weird. But I still like that it actually still gave them power ups, though. And speaking of that, they finally get supercharged enough to get back in the action to stop Brainiac. And we finally get to see Kara's new suit. I love it. I love that it looks so much like Superman's costume, but slightly different enough for Kara. Like, her cape looks more like a scarf type cape, and it looks so cool. Now, there's obviously things that I do not like that I've explained for Superman, like the shoulder pads. But for Kara, it technically works a little more. And I do want to explain more about Superman's costume at the end of this episode because there are things that I did not really get a chance to in the last one. But we'll talk about that when we get there. But first, we gotta see Kara and Clark kick Brainiac's ass. It's gonna be awesome because Brainiac still tries to use his kryptonite cannon, but because Superman and Kara are basically supercharged by the sun, it doesn't really work that well. But again, this is also something I don't necessarily like, that the boost from the sun can negate the power of Kryptonians, which is supposed to be Superman's biggest weakness, which is a bit weird, but it still kind of works because we get to see Brainiac make a Kryptonian sword dagger type thing, but it doesn't do much because Kara goes through that petty robot man in such an awesome fashion. And they finally ended. Brainiac is destroyed, but Kara is a little injured because she got slashed by that dagger. So Kara comes in and holds her and tells her how good of a job she did. And he takes her home, or at least his home. And we finally get to see the rest of the Kent family. I've missed them so much. And we get to see Ma and Pa Kent give Kara so much unconditional love from the start, a big contrast from Brainiac. And it is a bit much for her. So Clark comes in normal clothing to calm her. And Jimmy and Lois were also there waiting for her, which is a sweet thing. And the sweetness doesn't end there because Clark finally teaches Kara how to play catch. And of course, Kara thinks you have to win at it because of how she was raised. But with catch, it's not a winning game, as Clark explains. And it's such a good thing for Clark too because he doesn't have to hold back anymore because they are both Kryptonians. And it's so good because now he doesn't have to feel like he's walking on eggshells, which is nice. And after this, we get to see how the city is reacclimating to normal living. We get to see how people are reacting. We get to see that Amanda Waller is still on the run because, she's a wanted criminal now for basically being a dictator. We get to see Kara live on Earth and just helping out. We see that the Daily Planet actually printed the show's title on its paper. But of course, Vicky has to one-up them by printing that they have a new hero, Supergirl. Very cool. Does that mean that Kara has to go and wear glasses or a wig like they've done in other media? And we get to see LexCorp is still around and that Lex hired Deathstroke. Let's see if he finally stops looking like a twink and actually looks like the Deathstroke we all know. And we also get to see Clark and Lois together again and how he was ready to move to Gotham for Lois because she had her job opportunity there, but she refused it. Not for Clark, but for herself because she says if she went to Gotham, she would be just a second Vicky Vale. And she doesn't want that. We all know that's not how Lois works. But I love how supportive Clark was ready to be, to go back and forth from Metropolis to Gotham over and over. And it would have worked, because you know what? He's Superman. I find this funny, and I love this scene where it shows Clark's game, because he does that one move where he puts his arm on the wall to lean on Lois, and it's very sweet and funny. But this can't be a Superman ending without Superman saving the day. But this time, he's not alone. He has Kara with him, with their new suits. But now this leads me back to what I want to talk about when it comes to these suits, mostly from Clark. See, the suit completely works for Kara. The scarf cape on her works beautifully. She never really needed the trunk. It didn't matter for her. She could have the skirt. She could not have the skirt. It didn't matter. For her, it could work. But for Clark, it doesn't look right. The shoulder pads do not work for him. The separating of the different blues don't work. It worked in the last one because it was very minimal, but here it's more exaggerated because they have the gold on the boots, like high top boots, I guess. It looks really strange. And also, no trunks. I thought by the time they got home and they were there for a while, his mom would give him the trunks and the belt. I thought that they were going to do that, but I guess not. And it makes it look really weird. I don't know. I do love the symbol, but now that's all I like about it. And there's been a lot of things I've seen where people say oh, we didn't know how good we had it until we lost it, right? And it makes sense because the last suit, it's not the best Superman suit, but it's really good, especially now from this suit. I don't know what they were thinking about it. I really hope in the next season they fix it. They give him the trunks. That's all I would want because it fixes the entire design for me. But that was my Adventure Superman episode 10. I have had a wild ride with this season. What about you? Did you like the season? Did you not? Did you like the changes they did? The things they brought back? Please let me know. What did you think of the suits from Clark and Kara? I would like to know from you because I personally don't like Clark's, but I do like Kara's. I will probably make one last video breakdown on this full season because the ones I've been making are just episode by episode reviews. But that comes later. But that's my Adventure Superman Season 2. Again, what are your thoughts? Please let me know in the comments down below. And please hit the notification bell if you'd like to see more. If there's nothing else, this has been Dudamite. I hope everyone stays nerdy. And I hope to see everyone in the next video.